We'll go ahead and get started with the folks we have. I don't know if the mics are live right now, but now they're live. Good afternoon. I'm Jimbo Jackson, the chairman for the Leon County Board of County Commissioners. I want to welcome our colleagues. Normally, we're visiting your place. So I want to welcome our colleagues to the chamber today and all the folks that are in attendance. I won't waste anyone's time, and we'll jump right over to Cherie. If you would, go ahead and talk about our way of work. And I think as far as discussion items or moments to be recognized to speak, we'll just kind of go with a nonverbal signal, but don't feel afraid to jump in if I miss you or don't see your request to speak. Cherie.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioners, it's a pleasure to have you all here with our the first joint meeting of our 2019 cycle of comprehensive plan amendments. What I'm going to do is briefly tell you how the meeting's going to flow, and then I'll hand it over to Artie White, who is our comprehensive plan division manager. We have 4 amendments in this cycle. Today, there won't be any need to vote. It's a workshop. It's something that we do in advance of the voting meetings so that you have a chance to ask questions amongst yourselves, to ask questions of us. Let us know if there's anything more that you'd like before you get to the public hearings, which will happen in March and May. We have, once we get through those 4, then we have reserved the bulk of the time at the end of the meeting for discussion of the comprehensive plan and the land use element update, because we're moving into a significant amount of public outreach at this point, and substantial work on that in the course of this year. So want to make certain that we understand any of your concerns or have a chance to answer questions, and likewise bring anything back to you in the upcoming meetings. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Artie, and he is going to walk us through each of the first amendments. Again, you don't need to vote on this, but please do let us know if you have questions.
If we end up wanting to vote on something.
Thank you, Chairman, Board, Mayor, City Commission. It's good to see you all. As Cherie noted, we have basically 2 parts of this workshop today. The first will be the 2019 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Cycle, and then the second part will be an update on the Land Use Element Update. Jumping right in, for especially some of the members of the public that are here, just a quick reminder, you're aware of this, but comprehensive planning in terms of the process is really the attempt to look at community goals and community aspirations and distill that down into public policy. That public policy for Tallahassee and Leon County is a joint comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan is composed of 11 different elements. We'll be talking about 2 of them for the 2019 cycle amendments and then 2 others for the land use element update. But they cover a variety of topics as kind of shown in the graphic here. State statute is basically our guiding document for what we do with the comprehensive plan, specifically Chapter 163 of the Florida statutes. According to the statutes, the comprehensive plan is the principles, guidelines, standards, and strategies for orderly and balanced future economic, social, physical, environmental, and fiscal development of an area. That's why it's called a comprehensive plan. And then the role of the comprehensive plan really is also to set parameters for much more detailed, much more specific land development regulations. We'll get into a conversation about that when we talk about the land use element update. But basically the comp plan is a little bit higher level, broader public policy. The land development code and the zoning, this part of that is where a lot of the details go. Our comprehensive plan was adopted in 1990. And then as with state statute, there are basically 2 ways that we generally amend this. One is an annual comprehensive plan amendment cycle. I'll jump into those really quickly here. And then every 7 years we do an evaluation and appraisal review. That's something that the statutes say that we should do every 7 years. And then sometimes we do a much more comprehensive review, which is the land use element update, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But jumping into the 2019 cycle comprehensive plan amendments, we have 4. 3 of them are map amendments. That means they're to the future land use map, which is a part of the land use element of the comprehensive plan. And one of them is a text amendment to the capital improvements element. I'll jump into the details of these now. So the first one is a map amendment within the city limits. It's located off of Jackson Bluff Road. This is almost directly west of Florida State University's Doak Campbell Stadium, if that helps provide some orientation as to where this is. This was privately initiated, meaning that the property owner, in this case, actually several property owners came together in the neighborhood requesting this amendment. It is within the city limits, so this workshop, everyone will discuss it. However, when it comes to voting at the March 12th meeting, this would be only voted on by the city. The requested land use change would take it from a land use category called residential preservation to a land use category called university transition. In order to implement that, they would also need a rezoning from residential preservation to university transition. This is considered a small-scale amendment. It's less than 10 acres. Essentially, that means that on March 12th, that would be the adoption instead of a transmittal. So the process for small-scale amendments is a little bit shorter than the one for large-scale amendments. This is what the future land use map looks like now and what it would be proposed to look like. The orange is residential preservation, the blue is university transition, and you can kind of see how everything around this property is currently university transition. Likewise with the zoning, you can see the small neighborhood, this RP2, and it would go to university transition, similar to what's north, south, or northwest and east of it. And not terribly different from what's south of it with MR1. Anytime we do an amendment that involves residential preservation, we apply an extra layer of scrutiny to that. One, we want to protect neighborhoods and make sure that strong and viable neighborhoods don't see a premature conversion to a different land use category. Part of that is looking at homestead exempt properties. We also look at rooming houses. Those are properties that have been registered to allow more than 3 unrelated people within that. Typically, you see that in a situation with student housing. Then we look at general rental properties and things like that in the area. Based on that analysis, there are 7 registered rooming houses in the area. There was 1 homestead exempt property, and the remainder of the entire subdivision is not rooming house, but rental properties. So looking at that, it does look like a good candidate for this amendment. Looking at what's allowed and what would be changing, residential preservation is a generally residential land use category, allowing up to 6 dwelling units per acre. That's consistent with what the zoning is as well. And then university transition, both the land use category and the zoning would increase that to 50 dwelling units per acre and also allow some non-residential uses, primarily focused on the uses that would be needed by the student population and by the universities. Staff is recommending approval of this amendment, and when we did the public hearing with the local planning agency, they also recommended approval of this amendment. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have on this amendment.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
you said this would be a city vote, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
But can I speak to that?
Sure, go ahead.
We had a big scramble over this. If we let the city vote on it stuff and we vote on the county stuff and never the twain shall meet about a year ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought we kind of came back to a position where we all want to vote on everything. Remember, I mean, we took a walk. The county took a walk on that one issue.
Because last year we had separate meetings.
We had separate, but we had a discussion later about that.
If I'm not mistaken,
whether we all ended up voting on everything.
I think we said that what would be city, and the city would take those votes, and what would be county, and the county would take those votes. That's what I remember the conversation.
But we would still meet together.
But we still meet together. Yeah, that's what I thought.
So we still meet together, stay in the same, all right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that, because I was sort of confused about how we finally wound up on it.
Because I think the conversation that was had was that the city amendments that were voted on by the city were binding for the city, but if we took votes on those amendments, our votes were non-binding.
Right, but
and so we decided to just allow each other to vote on each other's amendments, but hear the information here together.
It was the Kalaran Country Club stuff that became, and we were hearing on the county, we were hearing a lot, and we felt like, we were sort of muzzled from discussing it since we weren't going to vote on it.
So to understand the rules of the game, and that's why I asked the question, the city would be voting on the city stuff and the county would be voting on the county stuff.
That's correct, Commissioner. As part of the 2018 cycle, there was an amendment that clarified that in the intergovernmental coordination element.
Just wanna be
We
clear.
tended to still have joint meetings so the discussion could occur, but the actual voting would be based on jurisdiction.
Okay. Just wanted to get that clarified.
So in situations like this, where you got university transition all the way around that residential preservation, I'm assuming that. Why was that, or how long has it been that way, and why did it take so long? If it did take long for it to switch over to university transition, or for us to see the amendment.
Yes, Commissioner. We have gradually, over time, made amendments to that area based on just neighborhoods becoming more student-oriented. We've always been very careful with these types of amendments, wanting to make sure that we don't prematurely convert a neighborhood to a different type of use or a different land use category. And so, piece by piece, this has occurred around this, and this is kind of the final piece of that area.
Now you said we, so this amendment came from the applicant. We didn't initiate this, or did we initiate this?
It came from the property owners, Commissioner.
Okay, so but you said we. So in the past, we have gone to landowners and asked them to consider.
No, Commissioner. Usually the property owners come in, and then we as staff will do a staff report on it and make a recommendation.
To the church, and they asked us.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just to be clear, Murat Subdivision is a city vote or a city item, correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
I'll just get clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Maddox, you were kind of honing in on a question I had, so I appreciate the clarity because I thought we had amendments in this area on Jackson Bluff or just on Pensacola Street near this area in the past couple of years. Is that right, Artie?
That's correct, Commissioner. Last year there was one off of Chapel Drive, and then 2 years before that there was one adjacent to that area. So it's come in kind of piece by piece.
Okay. I appreciate that. I think it would be interesting at some point. The last time one of these came up, I believe it was Chapel last year, and I noted you have a different comment on the sector reports in the next item, so I appreciate that. But the sector reports are very outdated, so I'm glad we're moving away from using that as an assessment. But I did think that from time to time, it might be helpful to have a larger map of the area. It is helpful to see the adjacent land use and that this is meeting university transition in this particular area. But the size of the map that you all provide, while very helpful every time, it seems when we get into ongoing transition in an area like this, and it may not be the same for all of our different amendments, but for something like this, I wouldn't mind seeing the broader scope, the university transition that we've already moved in the last, say, 5 years in this area, and what gaps may be there for the future. I'm not sure that's necessary all the time, but that was a question that came up on this one that may be helpful to us to kind of vision what's coming in the future. Would that work for you all?
Commissioner Richardson and then Commissioner
Thank you,
Maddox.
Mr. Chairman. I don't believe there are, if there are not that many more properties in that area that are residential. I mean, they've got a huge student apartment complex going up, as a matter of fact, right there on that corner. And I'm trying to think of where there might be other residential properties in that area.
The only place that's coming to mind at this moment, Commissioner, is directly east of the Chapel Drive Amendment. Last time there was a piece that remained residential preservation.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any others at this time.
Yeah, but that whole area, Commissioner, is totally student
Yes, sir.
apartments and duplexes and there's some commercial with the Wendy's and the Hungry Howie's, and I think there might be I don't know if they moved that credit union that was, but it's all student housing and commercial.
Just to be clear, Mr. Chair, I was thinking of, say, that one pocket near Chapel Hill that is not, the property owners have not yet come to us to initiate a change. And so we may have, it would just be interesting to me to see how many pockets, if there's just one that remains in the middle of UT, for our thinking going forward. That was my only point, because you're right, this particular area has been transitioning, and that's why I mentioned we've seen amendments almost every cycle for the last few years within this same scope.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Question.
Commissioner Marks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My interests are totally different. I mean, I understand what's going on here on this side of campus, but my interest on the other side of the campus. As you see, some of the housing that's going up closer and closer to Frenchtown, I would like to be able to protect the residential preservation that is over there and make sure that it doesn't creep more and more into Frenchtown. So when you said we, I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested at all in seeing it, that UT creep any more into Frenchtown than it already is. And so that's why I was wondering, do we have to be concerned about later on that these same kind of amendments coming back to us from those folks looking to build synergy off of all development that's happening on Macomb and even behind what used to be, where the McDonald's is, that little neighborhood back there behind that, where Strong and Jones is?
Dewey.
Yes. So back there. So I mean, that's why I asked the question of, okay, are we getting these from folks? Are we encouraging folks? And Commissioner Dozier brought up a good point in that if those kind of amendments do come back, I don't just want to see that little block. I want to see how it fits in with the whole area around it, a wider radius around it, so I get a bigger picture of how it may be either integrating into or intruding into what we know as the Frenchtown area. And the other side, I mean, I probably won't have a vote on it because it's a city vote, but at least from my information, I would like to know.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Murat?
Follow up to what you're saying. My interest is we have this before us for discussion today, and then we have sector plans back here in the back. And my question really is not just for this one, will we ever tie together the recommendation for any of these subdivisions in fact, in terms of changing the land use? Will we tie that into the planning process when we develop these? Because that will get rid of us encroaching in certain areas because it will be planned and we'll know it ahead of time. And I know these are out of date that are in here now, but I think as we go through the planning process, that's going to be a necessity.
Understood.
Thank you. Another comment?
The next two map amendments are in the unincorporated part of Leon County. The first one is located off of Tower Road. This one was also privately initiated by the property owner. This is a request to change a piece of property from urban residential to the industry and mining land use categories. Actually, it's urban residential 2. And then to implement this, there would also need to be a rezoning. Currently, it's zoned R3, which is single-family detached, attached, and two-family residential, and they would like to take it to light industrial. This would also be a small-scale amendment, so the March meeting would be the adoption of that. One thing to note about this property is, in our research, we found that this was previously mined, and part of the site was also backfilled with construction debris, and so it's really not necessarily an ideal location for residential development. This is what the future land use map currently looks like and what it would look like if this were approved. One thing I will point out about this map that's not clear from the map is the purple directly underneath the site is the suburban land use category. That is where the light industrial zoning used to go. Last year, there was the passage of a new land use category, industry and mining land use category. So traditionally, the site would also look purple, just like the property beneath it. But in this case, it would be the industry and mining land use category. This is actually the first application of that. The zoning map shows a little bit clearer picture. So you can see directly underneath it is M1 light industrial, and this site would also go to M1 light industrial. It is adjacent to, I believe, the Talquin water treatment facility and also a park. So the park provides a little bit of a buffer between this and an adjoining neighborhood.
Commissioner Minor.
Thank you.
You want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Already in the materials, we talk about how of the 7 acres, there's really less than 2 acres that can be developed with the easements that are applied. Just from my own curiosity, which 2 acres? Can you kind of give us a sense on where those 2 acres are?
It would be right in this area, Commissioner.
Okay.
There are easements kind of on each side of this, which also provide kind of a natural buffer between this and adjoining uses.
Great. Thank you.
Mr.
Any questions?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Dozier.
Artie, I just wanted a clarification here. And I'm scrolling back up to the intro item. The description of light industrial within the attachment is pretty robust, and it reflects the new category that we created. The intro that you had just in the summary or the analysis piece of the item, such as assembly of apparel or food processing, including slaughter. I had made a note there because that seemed much more restrictive than what we had contemplated. So I just want to square those two, that language up front seemed not to include the new type of light industrial, light manufacturing that we might see. I will note divvy up socks as one example. So am I reading this right, that the first paragraph was just a really brief summary, but we do include other types of businesses in the light or in this industrial? Is that right?
For the introduction, we were just trying to give a broad overview with the detail being further into the staff report.
Just wanted to double check because it's important to capture those new businesses. Thanks.
Yeah, agreed.
I know. Thank you. Additional comments? All right. Moving along.
So the final map amendment that's in unincorporated Leon County is the Bexar Property. This would be a request to change the property from urban residential to the suburban land use category. At this time, they would not be looking for a rezoning. This would be considered large scale, so it exceeds that 10-acre size. What that means is there would be a transmittal hearing in March and then an adoption in May. So there's an additional step because it's a large-scale map amendment. This one was privately initiated by the property owner and his family. This is what the current future land use map looks like and what it would look like in the future. One thing that I will point out that's not abundantly clear on this map is the yellow surrounding the site is planned development. That basically means that it's a master planned property. In this case, this is the Wolani property. And so in the future, you would see in this general vicinity a town center. So that would have a mixture of uses, much like the suburban land use category. And there's a PD&E, Project Development and Environment Study for Wolani Boulevard ongoing at this time, which would bring Wolani Boulevard somewhere in this vicinity, the actual alignment to be determined by that PD&E study. The urban residential 2 land use category allows up to 20 dwelling units per acre. That's the same as the residential limitation on suburban. It's 20 dwelling units per acre. So you see a comparable amount of residential development allowed. The difference is the suburban land use category would allow non-residential uses as well if there's the infrastructure to support it. It's currently zoned R3, which is 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre. The site would currently retain that, but in the future, if infrastructure is available, water, sewer, roadway access, the property owner may come back in the future with a rezoning. That is a public process. There would be notifications, there would be public hearings to change it to something that allows non-residential. So in the short term, it would stay the same. In the long term, there's a potential for a change given infrastructure that may be expanded out to that area. Staff is recommending approval of this. The local planning agency also recommended approval of this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick question before you all move.
Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are they going to be looking to annex this property at any point? Do you know? Have they indicated an interest in annexation?
They have not indicated that, so I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I do want to make a comment. First time welcoming our new colleagues from the city, and welcoming our former colleague back, and of course, Commissioner Richardson. So this is one of those that kind of, to me, anticipates the changes that we all know are coming. Once the road study is being done, the city powerhouse property in that area, the future interchange, I know that's part of the study, is that right, about the alignment of Wonlani Road and where the interchange might go in. I would be interested, and Artie, I'm not sure this is going to be right for a year or more. I mean, it could be a long time, but at some point, just like the conversation we were just having, to think about what's coming in the future, what requests may come, whether annexation's there or whatever, this is going to be a substantial change to that area. We all know the public involvement we've seen in the past as Wonlani got started on the first phase. I think it just might be in our interest to have a broader conversation about what's happening there. We've got Thornton Road extension hanging out there, I believe, other things. But I wanted to mention that in the context here because with the city, you all have a lot of decisions, I anticipate, with the property. That will be on your agenda for sure, but if we can work that into the conversation when you all are ready, I think that would help us as we look at these changes as well. Thank you. That was more for the table than for you, but thanks.
Anyone else? All right, moving right along, Audrey.
The final amendment that we have as part of the 2019 cycle is a text amendment to the capital improvements element. Honestly, this is really kind of a cleanup amendment. This was initiated by the Tallahassee-Leon County Planning Department, so it's a publicly initiated one. Essentially, every year, both the city and the county commissions adopt the capital improvement schedule. As part of that capital improvement schedule, the Leon County Schools 5-year district facilities work program is adopted as part of that. Historically, we've had a policy in the comprehensive plan, it's this one, that we would amend as well that adopts the that school facilities work program by reference. According to state statute, it only needs to be adopted by ordinance, which is what we do with the capital improvement schedule. So we would be reflecting that. The end result doesn't change, honestly. It's the process that would change, and we're just clarifying it to be consistent with state statute. So staff is recommending approval, and the local planning agency also recommended approval of this.
All right.
The overall schedule, as I've mentioned, Tuesday, March 12th would be the first public hearing. That would be where the city and county commissions both adopt their respective small-scale map amendments. There would be the transmittal for the large-scale amendment. That's the Bexar Property amendment. And then a transmittal for that text amendment as well. Those two, the Bexar Property and the text amendment, would come back after a state review and be in front of the county commission for the Bexar Property and both the city and county commissions for the text amendment on May 14th. And that concludes the part of the workshop on the 2019 cycle. We can move into the land use element update unless there are any other questions.
Seeing none, we'll move on.
So the land use element update was initially initiated by the Board of County Commissioners in December of 2014 and then kind of confirmed in January of 2015 by both the County Commission and the City Commission. The direction that we received was to align the land use and development plan with established community priorities, beginning with the land use element. There are a couple of reasons why this is important. If you look at the land use element that we have in place today, there's a number of structural issues, if you will. There's some objectives that are orphaned, meaning that amendments have occurred to either the objectives or the goals themselves and kind of left the policies there or the objectives there by themselves. There's some outdated ones as well. We'll talk about some of those specifically in a moment. There's places where there's too much detail. As I kind of mentioned at the start of the workshop, the comprehensive plan is supposed to provide the broader public policy, and the detail is supposed to be in the land development code, specifically the zoning regulations. There are objectives and policies that reference certain dates that have passed. I'll give an example of that in a moment. And then there's some changes at the statutory level, at the state level, that changes some of the ways that we do things as well. So these are some of the things that need to be addressed through this process. An example of that is Objective 3.2. It says provide for a convenient, aesthetically pleasing, and compatible location of office uses to provide businesses and professional services, employment opportunities that are easily accessible through planned integration into the existing transportation network. That sounds very nice. However, when it comes to implementing that, it's very difficult based on the given language to know what it's meant by aesthetically pleasing, as well as compatible location, and then the planned integration. Some of these things sound great, but when it comes to working with both growth management and the development support and environmental management departments, it gets very tricky because of the vagueness and ambiguity in this language. Another example of kind of the policies that need to be updated would be the one by 2001, local government will include requirements in their land development regulations that tell us to do various things. As much as I don't want to admit that 2001 was a while ago, it was a while ago, and this is an opportunity for us to look back at these, see if they've been accomplished, either update the date or remove this policy if appropriate. But we probably should not continue referencing a date that has passed. And then an example of the excessive detail. As you can see on this slide, the comprehensive plan and the land development code are almost verbatim the same. And again, the comp plan is supposed to provide the parameters for the land development code, and the land development code is supposed to include the specific details. So this is a place where we could probably clean this up a little bit. And another thing is when you have this level of detail in the comprehensive plan, it does make it a little bit harder to understand by the general public because it is technical and detailed. And we would like the comprehensive plan to be a little bit more user-friendly than it is today. There's some opportunities. In 2011, changes were made at the state level that basically reduced the statutory oversight on this. What this essentially means is they turned over, I know this is kind of rare for the state, but they've turned over more power to the local governments to set our own goals, set our own aspirations, set our own policy on who we want to be as a community. And so this is an opportunity for us to really reflect what we want as a community versus what the state wants for us. And generally, some of the things that we'd like to accomplish through this process is to simplify the comprehensive plan, make it a little bit more user-friendly. Right now it is difficult, and since this is supposed to guide what our community looks like in the future, we want someone from the general public to be able to pick up the document and know what the future of Leon County and the city of Tallahassee will be. We'd like to remove some of the redundancy. There's a couple of examples of that. There's land use categories that are almost exactly the same. One example is we have urban residential, which allows 4 to 10 dwelling units per acre. We have urban residential 2, which allows 0 to 20. And so when you have land use categories that have the same uses and one fits directly into the other, that's an opportunity for us to streamline a little bit and remove some of that redundancy. We can incorporate some of the recent planning efforts. There was the Urban Forest Master Plan that has been completed. The Canopy Roads Management Plan, the city is currently doing a resiliency plan. There's similar efforts by the county. A lot of these efforts recently have been completed recently, and there's an opportunity to incorporate those into the comprehensive plan, reflecting our current priorities and initiatives. And then finally, this also provides an opportunity to improve coordination with the Department of Transportation, since we would be looking at land use and transportation together. The state has moved to a complete streets process where they look at land uses to determine what the roadways network would look like. And so by looking at land use and transportation together now, it can improve that coordination and help us get the streets that we would like from the state versus what we sometimes have been getting in the past. This does not mean that we want to throw the comprehensive plan out that we have now. This is not a complete throw everything away and start over. The current comprehensive plan has served our community well, and there are aspects of it that we'd really like to make sure that we build on and expand instead of starting from scratch. A couple of examples, this is not an exhaustive list, but a couple of examples. The urban service area has served the community well. We are looking at the available infrastructure within the urban service area and parts that currently don't have infrastructure. That's part of the analysis. I'll get into data analysis a little bit more in a moment. The Southern Strategy area, we've made a lot of investments in the south side of this community. That has served us well, and we intend to continue doing that, given the direction from both the board and the commission here. The Complete Streets policy and our mobility element has served us well, and again, we would like to build on that instead of throwing that out. And recently, the rural land use category and the lake protection land use categories were rewritten, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, if you will, based on stuff that has been done recently and has been serving our community. With that in mind, this is the overall process. Essentially, there's 4 phases. The first one is community values. We want this entire effort to be driven by what the community values, what we as a community have in mind for our future growth and development. The second phase would be the development of goals. The third phase is the development of objectives. And the final phase would be the development of policies, goals being kind of the broader aspirations, objectives being those measurable things that we use to achieve the goals, and the policies being specific strategies to get us there. We're currently in phase 3. Both the city and county commissions have previously seen draft goals. We're currently working on objectives. With that in mind, we wanted to really make sure that all parts of our community had a voice in this effort. And so we've really tried as hard as we can to spread the word. I know this is kind of a long list. I promise I won't read them all verbatim. But these are a lot of the venues that we've used to help spread the word, to try to encourage people to participate in this process. We've also heavily used social media, recognizing that's where a lot of people receive their news. Now we've leveraged both the city and the county's social media, as well as the planning department's website. We created a shorter URL to take you directly there. It's taogov.com/land use update. And on that site, there's an entire history of this project, so you can see every step of the way. We started this public outreach in April of 2017. We had an online survey. It was very high level, but we wanted to make sure we were engaging the community at the very beginning of the process, so they didn't feel like we were showing up at the end with something that they didn't have a say in throughout the process. So we started very high level. We did an online survey on community values. We had 1,092 responses from that, and I will say that for something as exciting as the comprehensive plan, that's actually really good turnout for something like this. There was one response that was printed. We did try to make sure that there were more accessible ways of taking the survey, so we had it both online, digitally, as well as printed copies available for people to take. Overall, the community values that started shaping the project were equity, livability, choice, opportunity, and stewardship. These probably sound pretty consistent with what you hear from the public. We then took those community values back out to the community in 2017 and did a series of public workshops. We did them all over the community, try to make sure that we got rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas, the northeast, west and south part of our communities to hear back from the community on those community values and to help draft goals. The draft goals, these are just the working titles of them. The agenda packet actually includes the full language of it. But essentially, it's places where people want to live, learn, work, and play, a healthy community, a robust economy, housing options for our diverse population, and a balanced transportation network. As you can see, this is basically land use and transportation woven together moving forward. We took these goals back out to the community to get input on what objectives we would use to achieve those goals. This was done in 2018. Again, we worked all over the county, trying to make sure that we got urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas, the north side, south side, east side, west side of the community. We had about 128 people participate. I know that It was slightly higher than that, especially in Summerbrook. Some of the people did not sign in to the sign-in sheet, which is where I get my numbers, but I can verify that at least 128 people participated in this effort. All of that community input we've taken and tried to distill down and learn from. It centers generally around 9 themes. I'll go through those quickly. The first one is affordability. That was a big topic of discussion through all of these workshops. It's affordability of housing, affordability of transportation, affordability of office and retail space. Essentially, what that means is, one, we are looking at affordable housing that is consistent with the board's strategic plan and strategic initiatives to look at that. But it's also looking at, is housing affordable in our community beyond just affordable housing? Sometimes it's hard to talk about that because we use the same terminology. But we like to think of it in terms of, if someone had a child and they went off to college and came back and wanted to live in our community, could they afford to do so? And if so, where would they be able to live? Would they be able to live in neighborhoods that are near their parents, if they chose to, or elsewhere in the community? Or as people age and they may need to downsize if they are unable to maintain the current house that they have, are there affordable options for them? The same with the office and retail space. If someone came back and wanted to start a business in our community, is there places for them to do that? They can afford to do so. Or also, if you retire from your current job and you want to do something different and move on, would you be able to find a place to launch a new business or a career? And then also transportation. We want to make sure that we don't trade the affordability of housing for more expensive transportation, because in the end, that's not going to help you for spending the same amount. So we want to make sure that we're looking both at transportation as well as affordability. Theme 2 is improved access. That's looking at things like food deserts and making sure that people can get to the things that they need in order to meet their everyday lives. The third theme we heard was the environment and how vitally important that is. And this is also consistent with a lot of the efforts that the city and county both are putting forward currently, as well as things like the Urban Forest Master Plan and the County Roads Management Plan. Housing, I know we mentioned affordability of housing a moment ago, but housing also came up in terms of meeting the needs of people in different stages of life. What that means is young adults may need a certain type of housing. They may start families and need a different type of housing. They may then get a little bit older and become empty nesters, and then they no longer have as many people in their households, and that might change their housing needs. They may age out of the ability to manage their properties that they have now and may need something else. So do we have housing that's reflective of the different groups of people in our community as they go through different stages of life? Community character, that's also a strong one. This kind of ties back to Frenchtown in a way. There are places in our community that really want to protect who they are, what they look like, who they've become, and we want to make sure that we don't do anything that would drastically change the character of people's community, whether it be their neighborhoods or just general places around the community. Safety and comfort, looking at roads, neighborhoods, and just general activity centers around the community. Safety and comfort, they're different, but they're related, and those are important things that we've heard from the community. Global challenges we've heard, and this is everything from looking at anything that would impact and change the climate to autonomous vehicles, cars that are driving themselves, the emergence of rideshare, things like Uber, Lyft, things like that. Those change the way we handle our transportation system, and we're going to have to look back. Even though they're global challenges, they're going to have local ramifications that we're going to need to look at and address. Energy and environmental efficiency. How do we use our resources? Are we good stewards of our resources? This also ties to looking at, are we able to have land development patterns that meet desire to move to renewable energies moving forward? And then human interaction. Do we as a community foster places where people come together, engage with each other, interact with each other? We often call this social infrastructure, which was also a strategic initiative by the county that we're looking at. But it is very, very tied in with the land use and transportation elements of the comprehensive plan. We are going back out to the community starting this Thursday in person. There's an online workshop now, but we want to engage the community on these different objectives to address those 9 themes and find out ways that we would measure success for that so we can update the draft objectives with more metrics. We're trying to reach all parts of the community again through the workshops. We're really looking at like a 3-tiered approach. One, we want to do public open houses. This might be a little bit higher level just because of the volume of information, but try to cover everything in a series of workshops. We then would have what we're calling deep dive workshops, where we specifically look at one goal and all the associated objectives that have been drafted for that. And would do, since there's 5 goals, we would do that over a course of 5 different nights. That really gives us the time to address each one in much more detail than we could in the public open houses. And then for those who can't make it to a public workshop, we do have the digital workshop. We recognize that it's hard for people to come out to meetings sometimes, but we still want to hear from as many people as possible. We're currently trying to also schedule another meeting in Miccosukee, as well as one at the Lake Jackson Community Center. It's amazing how well used that facility is, and it's been booked up, but we're trying to squeeze in there. If not, we're looking for other alternatives in that general vicinity that we might be able to do that. We recognize that there's one area that we haven't been able to book yet, but we wanted to go ahead and get started. So, while we were talking to the community, we're also actively engaged in a series of different analyses of data. We've looked very specifically at population and demographic data, looking to make sure that we can accommodate a growing population. We've looked at major and planned developments in terms of residential, how will that help us accommodate our population, as well as the infrastructure associated with those. We've looked at undeveloped properties in the community, accounting for some of the reasons that that's not developed, whether they're wetland features or things like that on the sites. We're looking at the areas where we currently have urban services, water, sewer, streets, things like that, as well as locations within the urban service area that don't currently have those services, and then looking at how that would be planned over the next several years. We've looked at all of the map amendments that have occurred since 1990, trying to identify some things that are going on with that, where they're happening, what those amendments are. We've looked at where we have bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We know where that is, and that also tells us where we don't have them. So since we're looking at land use and transportation, that's key. And kind of consistent with the safety and comfort, we're also looking at crash data and places where we may need to look at places where we can improve the safety and comfort of different areas. With regards to the population projections, we're looking at 2045 as our horizon year for the updated comprehensive plan, land use element and mobility element. So looking at our population growth, it's about 51,000 people, 52,000 people. Based on the current size of the average household in Leon County, that's 2.33 people. We would need approximately 22,000 additional development units. Usually you have a little bit of slack in the market. It's not that every family has one house. There's always some that are being bought and sold and things like that. So to allow slack in the market, planners have traditionally applied a multiplier factor. 1.5 is usually the standard. But that means by 2045 we would need 33,327 additional units in our community. And we're looking at where that is accommodated, specifically where infrastructure is available, where the urban service area is, where we plan to have growth, and making sure that we can accommodate this moving forward. We're also looking at data from other sources. We may not be doing the calculations ourselves, but there's a lot of data in the urban forest master plan, especially with canopy coverage, percentage canopy, looking at the breakdown of what kind of trees we have in our community. The Canopy Roads Management Plan has some data analysis in there. The Alternative Mobility Funding System Study, the data from that will also help inform the mobility part of this. The city is currently doing a resiliency plan, and so we've been working very closely with them to make sure that we have access to the data that they're analyzing. The CRTPA, Capital Region Transportation Planning Agency, is doing a bicycle and pedestrian master plan. We've been working with them to make sure that we have access to the data that they're looking at so we can tie into those efforts, as well as the regional mobility plan. The last one that was done is the 2040, but soon they'll be doing the 2045 one, and that would match up with the horizon year for the comprehensive plan. We also expect to do more. A lot of this will be based on the public engagement that we do and what we hear from the community. That'll help shape this. That's why we were trying to do a values-based but data-informed approach. The values will help us understand what we need to analyze, what data we need to collect, and then we'll collect it and analyze it. But generally what we're looking at is what are some of the trends that we see in the community, what are the trends in the previous both map and text amendments, and what are some of the lessons we've got from that. Looking at the housing supply, again, housing came up twice in those themes, both affordability as well as making sure that there's the right type of housing for our community. So we're going to be looking at that and also redevelopment opportunities, looking at where places are primed for redevelopment, maybe vacant lots, maybe places where the current development is significantly less than what they're allowed to do under the comprehensive plan and zoning.
Is that mostly looking within the USA?
Predominantly, it'll be
Evaluations?
looking in the USA. The development rights are fairly low outside of that.
Could I interrupt to ask a
Sure, go ahead.
question? You're talking about all the agencies you work with. We know the comp plan has the force of law, but no money. So how closely do you work with the blueprint, which has the money? And in terms of, what is the partnership there in terms of following the comp plan? Every blueprint project that comes along, are you like, hip to jowl there or what?
That's one of the
What is the official way that works?
That's one of the benefits of the Department of Place. We are actually within the same umbrella department, Office of Economic Vitality, Blueprint, and Planning. And so that was really kind of I'm not trying to kiss up, but that was really a brilliant move when Place was developed to put all of those things together because they are all so related.
Not to put too much pressure on you, but
Thank you, Commissioner. We meet monthly at a minimum. There's absolute collaboration on all of this. That's the bottom line. And it goes from economic vitality to blueprint to planning and wrapping around, unequivocally.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted kind of a better picture.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So next steps in this overall process, this spring we're engaging the community on the objectives. We'll be providing status reports to both the board and the commission as we go through this process. We'll continue to collect data, continue to work with our partners who are also doing these plans, and really look at the public input in terms of how we collect and analyze that data. This summer, we intend to refine those objectives based on the input, include more metrics in it. We recognize that right now they're kind of high level, really like just initiatives, but we're hoping to kind of tie those down based on the input. When those metrics are established, that'll help inform any other data that we need to collect and analyze. We'll continue to provide status reports. And then this will be where we start looking at any potential changes that would be needed to the land development code. I kind of mentioned at the beginning that there's places where we may take it out of the comprehensive plan. Well, we want to make sure that it ends up somewhere. So this would be the stage where we really start looking at that. In fall, we hope to go back out to the community, take the refined objectives and some draft policies and get feedback on that. And then also continue looking at any potential changes to the land development code based on this effort. And then over the winter, we hope to refine that based on that public engagement, really start drafting what those land development code changes might actually be, review it for consistency with both state statutes as well. Anything that's proposed, we want to make sure it's internally consistent with the other elements of the comprehensive plan. Again, there are 11 elements total. We're looking at 2, but we want to make sure that anything that changes is still consistent with the conservation element, the historic preservation element, the economic development element, because we want to avoid places where they're competing policies. And then in spring of 2020 is when we hope to initiate the formal adoption process of the goals, objectives, policies, as well as any changes to the land development code that are needed. We want to bring those concurrently, so they happen together. And then finally, just kind of in summary, we're really looking forward to engaging the community. I know we talked about 3 different ways. We really encourage everyone to participate all 3 ways, really have a voice in this, and then we'll continue keeping you up to date as we go through this process. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
All right, Artie, looks like we have several in line to speak, so we'll start with Commissioner Minor, then Commissioner Bryant, and Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Artie, thanks very much to your team, yourself and your team over these last years. I attended some of the public outreach meetings that you had last year and was one of the citizens participating, and really commend you all for really going above and beyond to get that input from folks. One thing, it's a national trend, right? I mean, there's a skepticism of government, in all forms. People see the shenanigans at other levels of government, and they think, well, what's the local government here up to? One thing I'd like all of us to think about, and Artie, as you go through and meet with folks about the comprehensive plan revisions, we're doing a comprehensive rewrite, and a lot of it's cleanup. But what skepticists will say to us in the public, and many of my colleagues have probably heard the same thing, is like, what are they trying to sneak in? What types of unsavory things are they trying to work into land use? And so as we go through this, it'd be, to the extent that we can, I know it's not practical to have a red line version simply just showing the changes, but to the extent that we can, it'll be very helpful for us to highlight the differences on where we're diverging from the original comp plan. More than just the cleanup, but what things are we doing as a policy-making body to deliberate where we need to go? That's not an easy thing to do, right? Because it's an apples to oranges type of comparison in a lot of ways. But I think from what many of us have probably heard out there in the neighborhoods is the more we can get up front and talk about the changes in an honest way, sometimes highlighting things that might be perceived as controversial and just getting it out there in the open, I think will help all of us out in the long run and also get more buy-in from the public. I'm not insinuating that you all weren't planning to do that anyway, but just for the argument, just for discussion here, I wanted to make sure that from my perspective, from what I've been hearing out around the community, that's the kind of thing people want to see. And then the second point is, I'll have other detailed things later, but the second point, I really am grateful that you all are going to be spending some time on data analysis. I think many of us have met with some community leaders that have been involved in this for a very long time, Pam Hall, Debbie Lightsey, others. The more information we have at our disposal to make intelligent decisions, not just on the comp plan, but also the LDR, the better off we'll all be. The amendment analysis is going to be very helpful. And Ben and Vincent and I talked about that the other day. I mean, having a sense for 1,000 amendments in the last 29 years, how can we classify those amendments to kind of figure out, well, what changes have we needed to make over the last 29 years from the original comp plan? That might lend some insight on what we need to do going forward. And then I like the other data that you're going to be doing over the next several months. It's going to be really interesting to see where that goes, because I think it's going to be very helpful, especially to the newer commissioners like myself, on trying to help us project where we need to be. So, and those are my comments for now.
Right, Commissioner Bryant.
Yes, we've had a very detailed discussion before today, so I'm not going to go into many details, but let me say that our goals are really initiatives. We talk about being values driven, and that's great, but we also need vision. We need a vision statement, and it's going to differ from one sector to the next as to where they are and where they need to go. And I'm just trying to throw in some components that as you look at your restructuring of this process, that it will actually include performance measures to know if we're successful, and then follow up with obviously some discussion on how do we get there. So that just adds on to what we've discussed previously.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Artie, great job That's a very comprehensive, intense plan for the comprehensive plan. And having served on the Planning Commission, I've seen some of this develop. I actually see and hear some of my footprint on some of these things because we've had those discussions about going out to the community. But I would want to share with you an email that all of us city commissioners received from someone who is well known in the community and well known about this comprehensive plan. And I know that Wayne Tedder also received this, and I don't know if the county commissioners received it, but I'm sure our community leader has no problem sharing it with you. At the end of the email, she asked, I'm almost giving her away, huh? She asked that we please authorize the necessary objective data collection and analysis by an outside professional consultant with no agenda. Not saying that we have an agenda, but as Rick said, transparency, and people are having trouble trusting us at no fault of our own, of course. They're asking for some type of outside help to come in and look at this with us. Only then will, and the person says, only then will you have an even starting point for any comp plan element rewrite. Put any additional public involvement on hold until that is complete. And this, I'm quoting, "You are burning up citizen time and effort to no real purpose." So I say that to share, because I'm sure if we had a place for public comment, this person would have no problem sharing that. She is in the room. I just wanted to put that out there, that I too believe that it's great to collect data and great to do the analysis, but if it's our own data that we're looking at, our own stuff, nobody outside, there's no outside validation of it, it's going to be very difficult to accept it as the public would accept it, knowing that it has not been verified or validated by anyone else. And you've heard me say many, many times that I'm a data person. Well, the thing that we do in information technology is that you have an outside company come in and do what we call IVV, independent verification and validation. And those are the kinds of things that add credibility to what you're doing and make it more acceptable to others. Our staff is bar none, you are quite capable of doing this. I'm just saying that we might need to buy a little insurance to bring in someone from the outside to take a look at least at what we're doing, looking at our process and looking at how we're collecting and interpreting our own data. We're close to it, so we're going to like it and we're going to want to make it look good. We just need to make sure that it is good.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams-Cox. I will, Mr. County Attorney, if I could defer to you. We do have public speaker cards that have been submitted. Can you just clarify the policy regarding workshops and public speaking?
Because the rules of the location, in other words, the county's rules apply when the meeting is held in the county commission chambers, our policy is that we do not allow speakers at workshop meetings.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we waive policy last week.
Second.
All right. Motion has been made, it's been seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good then.
It's just the county. It's just the county.
Oh,
Waive their policy.
I'm sorry.
Opposed?
I'm sorry.
Opposed? Okay, good. Then I would like to invite a couple of speakers to speak based on the motion on the floor. Ms. Voss, I see that you're back in your trustee seat. And you'll, how about that? If you'll start our timer, I'll ask Ms. Lightsey, Debbie Lightsey, to come to the podium. Name and address for the record, and we will do, you have two cards here, we'll do 3 minutes. How's that?
They're not on the same subject, I prefer 6. But my first comment is on the map amendment process. My name is Debbie Lightsey, 2340 Cypress Cove Drive, Tallahassee, Florida. For the first 25 years of this plan, in recognition that we have a joint plan, all commissioners voted on map amendments and text amendments. And that was a difficult thing sometimes. and it pained us to get into each other's controversies. But this plan was made much better, much more balanced by the participation of city and county commissioners. And so I would suggest that the move to not vote on amendments outside jurisdictions was not a good idea. I'm a city resident, but I'm a county resident too. Commissioner Jimbo Jackson is my district commissioner, and the two at-large commissioners, I assume, represent me too. And on the day that you stop charging me county property tax, then y'all can stop representing me. Okay? There's been a tug of war through the years from the more urban stances of the city and mindset and the more rural of the county. But county commissioners represent us too. And that tug of war was very good for this community and very good for this plan. Everybody around this table was elected because you have different perspectives, and I think you should all weigh in on the amendments as you did for years and years and years. When this came up a year or two ago, Lou Shelley was so alarmed that he called me and he says, "Gosh, Debbie, what do we do?" And I said, "This trend has been developing for a long time, so I don't know what you do now. Lou, I'm gone." But joint plan, everybody voted. The friction, the tension, the balance was good for this plan and good for this community. And I suggest that you go back to the procedure that worked with difficulty and with tension for many years, but was good for the plan and good for the community. That's map amendment. I'll wait until some of my friends speak on the land use rewrite, and I'll have a brief statement on that too.
Thank you. And I'll ask to come to the podium Wendy Gray. Ms. Gray, name and address for the record, please.
I apologize, I've just come from the dentist, so if I sound a little weird. Wendy Gray, 1047 Myers Park Drive in Tallahassee. I'd like to make a couple of points, first beginning with the importance of data, not just to the planning process, but to the public engagement process. First, it lets the community know how well we're doing in terms of trying to meet some of our objectives. Artie mentioned that he felt that or his understanding is that the Southern Strategy and the urban service area are policies that are working well. I think if we had some data, some criteria that told us how we were measuring, that would be important information for the public to know about how effective we're being. Secondly, it would help the public make choices, particularly as it comes to objectives as opposed to values. For example, if we were to understand where property is available for redevelopment, most likely beneficial for redevelopment, that kind of information may inform what people think about objectives about where our population should be accommodated in terms of housing in the future. So having that information helps people to make informed recommendations and give informed input to staff. Finally, I would just like to mention Commissioner Bryant, the current comprehensive plan does have a vision statement. I'm not sure that it's been part of this review. It's been updated. I think it probably could use some updating, but is a very good starting place, so that may be something that staff can include in a future workshop. And lastly, I would like to ask that, knowing that your time is very valuable and limited, that the commissions would consider holding a workshop to look more closely at the data that is being developed and the objectives that are being developed. I know you want to hear from the public, but I think it would be helpful for you all to be informed on some of the material that's been accomplished to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Artie, I just want to, can I ask you to step down? I have a question for you, and that's regarding advertisement. We're going back into another set of public meetings, you said, for the fall of 2019, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. One of the, let's don't call it complaints, one of the opportunities I heard from some of my community members was a lack of notice and advertisement. So I talked actually to Alan and Vince as well. If we could, not everyone is technologically connected and technologically savvy, if we could somehow add signage as well as flyers, and we would be happy not only in District 2, but I'm sure all of our offices would be happy to circulate that information. I think they had sparse crowds. I'm speaking simply for District 2 at this point. They had sparse crowds in some of the District 2 workshops. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Wendy touched on a lot of what I had intended to bring up this afternoon. She talked about it from a data perspective, Artie, but you know, and Commissioner Bryan and I have been in this community a long time, maybe not as long as a lot of others, but we've been here, I've been here almost 40 years, and I know the Southern strategy of the comp plan has been talked about a lot, and I'm interested in knowing from the data what is working, because I'm not sure that it is, and because there is a lot of work to be done with respect to infrastructure, housing, commercial development, job creation, neighborhood preservation. And so I would like to see that data that would suggest that things are working. I think the data probably will suggest there is work to do. But I'm going to reserve that final judgment until we actually get the data. So and then my other question would be, what are the, and this is just rhetorical for right now, maybe later on you can bring this back to us, but what do you anticipate as the rewrite of that Southern strategy plan? I mean, it's pretty old at this point, and certainly needs some updating in light of how this community has changed and now the direction that the community is coming. It's coming south. And so I think that Southern strategy plan is going to have to reflect that Southern migration, if you will. I don't know if I should call it that, but and then the other thing is, you know, you talked about, especially when you talked about the housing needs that'll be here in 25 years or so. Obviously, where our current urban services area is will not accomplish that. So at some point in the very near future, I may not be on this board when it happens, but there has to be some discussion as to where this community is going to grow outside of that urban services area. Because right now, as it's drawn, Welaunee is it in terms of major land area where development can occur. And so to accommodate the, what was it, 33,000, we're going to have to look outside of the current urban services area. And so, you know, that discussion is going to have to be had at some point. And then the final thing that I had was just another organization for you to do some outreach to, and that's CANN, C-A-N-N, the Capital Area Neighborhood Network. And Christique Henry it's an organization of Southside neighborhoods. So if you could maybe contact Christique and include CANN in those organizations that you're doing outreach to.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate the discussion so far, and already appreciate the presentation. Echoing, I think, something you said, Commissioner Williams-Cox, that we have an exemplary staff. As I've heard from others in the community, and particularly, I know this extends to the entire planning department staff, but Artie, you have been singled out as doing a very good job in the workshops and communicating with people. So I just want to convey that your team has done a great job. I think for me, the questions about outside consultant, and I'm not sure if it's the same email, Commissioner Williams-Cox, but I'm not sure there's been many comp plan hearings like this where we haven't referenced Pam Hall, and I'm not sure she would mind because I don't think she's here today, but we did get it, if that was the person, or we did get an email from her. I know she met with a lot of us, and there's been others who've shared those thoughts. Wendy, you spoke to a number of them. The question about consultant to me is, we have a tremendous amount going on. We have limited resources within our planning staff. And is there a role for a consultant to look at a piece of this data analysis? Certainly, that can bring an outside perspective, and that is good. We're doing needs assessment for CHSP right now. We're doing a lot of other things that we bring in outside consultants. So I don't think that's a skill issue on our side. It may be capacity and it may be new ideas. So I guess I'm wondering if you if you want to throw this behind you to one of your counterparts, why we would choose to have an RFP, or I'm sorry, have a consultant engage on a piece of this. And Sheree, if I can mention one thing before you answer this, when Artie was going through the list of things that we could do on this, simplify it, make some things more specific, remove redundancy, those types of things. To me, it seems like these are two different categories, that those are things that you're looking at in your analysis, you showing the examples, that's very helpful about the same language in the Land Development Code and the comp plan. But the recent planning efforts, ideas, complete streets, our long-range transportation plans, Blueprint 2020, things like that, coordination, and I'd add to FDOT, all of our local entities, you've already spoken to Blueprint. It seems like these are two different kind of areas to tackle. I may be simplifying it too much, but I wonder if there's not a role for an outside perspective on kind of that second category, kind of looking at the future, what's new, things like that, versus some of the technical pieces that you're looking at. So two parts of that question. Why not? And then is there some kind of delineation we could have?
The quick answer is yes, there is a role. We are doing this work in-house as was requested. We do have ongoing planning services that we could draw upon if the boards and the commission decided to provide funding to that effect. So whether it be for that peer review, for the sake of a better word, the additional, I know you did bring up Pam Halslet, and she's part of our staff working group, a group that we use from, just to bounce ideas off of. And so she's brought that up before, looking at the costs and benefits of various development scenarios, which is another step beyond what we just have the hourly man-hour capacity to do in-house. So there is a role for that. What I could do is talk with our working group and some of those continuing services providers but based on the scope of the discussion that you provide back to us today, it'd be certainly something I could do and bring back at a future time, in the near future.
Okay, thank you for that. That is helpful. We've heard these questions a lot, and to me, and I think some of the comments that were just made, forgive me for not singling out, they were coming from everyone in the discussion, but also Wendy and Debbie, that having data, looking at Commissioner Richardson, how well our efforts have worked in the past. And I would add to that, not promising everything. The comp plan is not something that is going to solve every different problem. It's a guide. There's going to be a lot of other efforts that we have to do on housing and stormwater, all these different types of things. We all know that. So I think that the data does help us hone the questions for the public, but also for us. So whether, and I'll save any kind of, I don't know if we're taking a motion here or not, or any kind of request for information on the consultant for the rest of the discussion. I wouldn't mind see that. I would love to hear from all of you about whether or not we want to see that information Sheree just mentioned she could provide. But to me, this is a huge task. We do have a great staff that is a limited capacity to do everything in the world we may want them to do, just hours in the day. And there may be a piece of this we want to carve out. The other thing that I want to mention right now, and I'll come back to this, Mr. Chair, if we have more discussion, is that goal objectives, things that we've already drawn out of the public discussion, which is great. They are very general to me, and I am going to have a hard time looking at future recommendations without knowing how we've performed in the past. There was a note in this item, this was on the County Commission side, that we had approved a motion to have a joint workshop digging in and looking at the comp plan in general. We have a lot of new colleagues around the table, but also just we haven't done this for those of us who've been here for a while in a long time. I appreciate staff and County Administrator Benfinger. We had conversations about that, thinking that this agenda item would accomplish that goal. I think it accomplished a lot, and I appreciate the deep dive today. I would just say for my part, and hearing all of you, there is another piece of this discussion that I think it would be helpful for us to have as we move through this. Maybe that is in the fall once we do a little more of the data analysis, look at how we have performed in the past. So the reason why I broke down these two different parts is I think we could see ways to simplify certain elements, get rid of redundancy, things like that. I'm okay looking at that without any further data or anything like that, but these other bigger pieces, I still feel like we need a broader discussion among the 12 of us and with the public and our staff to really hone in on what we want to see come back. And I will leave it with this. We are still using the words revision, rewrite interchangeably and other things. There's still a question about exactly where we're going with this, wrapping our arms around it. So I think it would be helpful to have another conversation. I would be open to it with all of us to do that deeper dive. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let me get Commissioner Minor, and then I'll come to you, Kurt. Emmis, on point?
No.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Minor, and then we'll...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just following up on what Commissioner Tozer has said, I agree with everything that you said. I certainly am open to a discussion of funding for outside consultants to come in. I'd like to have a discussion here if everyone's willing to talk about what piece to take out and put in out for outside consultants to do. There's a benefit to having a large chunk of that be done by outside people in a dispassionate way. We all, the planning team, we all live here, our kids go to schools here, they're our neighbors, and in some respects, we can't help but be having a certain point of view. I think there might be some benefit for housing, for example, to have an outside consulting firm, very credible, very respectable, having a balanced, dispassionate point of view on this. One thing with regard to the housing piece, for example, I constantly hear throughout the community how we need more affordable housing, and by affordable housing, I'm talking about affordable quality housing. I've had Board of Realtors folks come to me and say, we have a queue of potential clients that we're trying to sell homes for that are looking for housing that is affordable in a nice neighborhood that they feel safe in. That type of analysis would be very helpful coming from perhaps the outside. Could probably shed some new light, some new ideas that are out of the box from what we've talked about before. So I don't know if this requires a motion. Maybe more discussion is needed first, but I'd be willing to entertain a motion that would provide the planning team the ability to explore consulting options and come back to us for funding opportunities.
How about we, Commissioner Richardson has yielded his time to go after Commissioner Maddox, correct?
Yeah, thank you. Just real briefly, we sit at this table with no funding mechanism. We're at the county, we have the city here, whose budget is going to come out of. The only reasonable funding mechanism that we can use that's a joint venture between us two would be Blueprint. So I'm trying to figure out, though we sit here and talk about consulting, if we take a vote here today and say we're going to do this, where are we funding it from?
The city, I think.
Yeah, right.
We just decided it was
Yeah, Mayor Daley.
I don't think it's a bad idea, but what I'm saying is I think this is a better conversation for us to have at the table.
Thank you, Mayor Daley.
Those who vote rule.
Yeah, I think we have it's a better conversation for us to have at the Blueprint meeting on Wednesday versus having it here. Maybe we ask for the planning team to come there, but we need some money to hire a consultant, don't we?
Okay, let me go to Commissioner Richardson, and we'll come right back to this end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I neglected earlier to acknowledge our staff and the work that they have done. I mean, just the hours that you all must have put in these public hearings and summarizing information and going back out, it's phenomenal. That, to me, engenders trust on the part of the residents, the citizens that we represent. But you know, I had some concerns about and I have all due respect for Pam. She's wonderful and expert in her field. But this project is so huge. I mean, to pull out any one piece for a consultant that's not in context with everything else that we're doing, I don't know how a consultant can be effective in advising us. I mean, this is huge, and our staff has the advantage of seeing all the pieces. And I trust that, you know, with the kind of public input that includes Pam, that they could come back with a product that I believe we could feel comfortable with without us not having to spend, you know, thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' money that we haven't identified where it's coming from at this point. So just for us to consider.
The county administrator reminded me that if it were to be a funded item, it would go to our bodies, our governing bodies, separately.
Okay.
I know you're in line. I'll go Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Dozier, and Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the idea of the peer review concept at some point. I'm wondering if what Wendy Gray suggested, which is for us to first get an evaluation of what we've accomplished already in what the data shows that we've done to date, if that's something that we could take a look at from Southern Strategy and elsewhere housing. I was particularly interested in the affordability too, not just of housing, but of also the small businesses and retail, which really figures into our economic development plans and even our zoning and the way we require every development to have a certain amount of retail, and then often the places are empty because people can't really afford a small locally owned business to go into this. So I wondered if we might just take it in two steps. One, to kind of find out what we've accomplished to date, and maybe once we see that, we can at that point get the peer review to say, well, what do other communities, what have they been doing with the same sort of plan? How can we move forward from what we've done so far, and then kind of get that outside view of where we go from where we are? Because I don't honestly know either, not just Southern Strategy, but in any aspect. You know, it's a long time. We've had 29 years of inching forward. So for me, I would just rather take it one step at a time, get the data from our staff, and so we know where we are, and then see if at that point we could, get the consultants or whoever, as you had suggested, to try to evaluate that piece of it, where we are, where we're going. And I think one of the things you mentioned was sort of putting on hold the public participation, and I don't think we should. I think we should keep that going pretty much as planned, so we can continue to hear from people and continue to get today's thoughts, because I think that's really vital. If we're looking to the future, we need to hear what people are going to be saying Thursday night at this first one that's coming up, I think. So I'd say don't stop the public piece of it.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the clarity on the budget. We fund the department jointly, city and county. Any funding requests, as you mentioned, I assumed would be coming back, and I am guessing people in Blueprint were kind of cringing a minute because we've already loaded them up a good bit. So just thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Richardson, I have no doubt that our staff could accomplish whatever we ask them to do. They always do. but we often go out for other consultants at different points for a wide variety of reasons. I am inclined to agree. I mean, we've already kind of started this phase of the public engagement with the meeting this week and everything, so I think it may be challenging to pull that back. But based on what Cherie had mentioned a moment ago, it seems like we could ask for additional information, get some direction from our staff on when they could accomplish this based on this round of public engagements, which goes through April. And I would like to suggest doing a workshop, as at least the county, we had taken a vote to do that, to focus on the status of what we've done in the past. I would also add in there, what are our tools in our toolbox, so that we can identify sector reports that we want to update sometime in the future, knowing that could be a little farther out. We may not need to cover the whole community, but kind of be strategic about which areas are in vital need. Past CRA conversations, we've always talked about the Frenchtown component. I know the city's been working on a plan the past couple of years for that, but there may be some areas that we identify as more critical need of that sector plan than others, something like that. So I think the getting a lay of the land of where we are, getting assessment of what the public engagement has been, and then getting some perspective from our staff on what they think a consultant could bring to the table on certain components or on everything. The last thing I want to say is on behalf of the CRTPA board, I served on, and I was sick last week and missed the meeting, and you all approved the RFP for the long-range transportation plan. Thinking about that piece, we've got the multimodal, we've got long-range transportation. Both of those consultants are doing a wide variety of public outreach, multi-county in that case. But I wonder if there's some piggybacking we can do. One of the consultant who was selected talked about a public meeting they did in another city that brought together all of the different planning efforts that were doing public meetings to do one big joint public meeting. There could be some creative ways to do that. And I think the numbers are good, the survey numbers were good, but bumping up those numbers for the attendees would be helpful in the future and limit those surprises that we might see in the future as well. So just adding that piece, I would like to see us make a request of staff to bring us back options for those consultants. We can reflect on the funding later, but if that was in the context of a meeting early fall or whatever time works best for our staff to get our arms wrapped around those other pieces, I think that will help us make the decision on if and what consultants might be helpful.
Okay. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Just two quick things. I'm all in favor of engaging the public, but I'm beginning to hear that there's some public fatigue because we've been asking, they've been telling us, and they're not seeing what they're asking for. So they're getting tired of broken promises. You saw that last week. You probably heard about the public meetings last week. We've got to be careful. I like the idea of collaborating and trying to get the information that you need in a big public meeting, but they're getting tired of us asking and then they're not seeing any results. The other thing is, as we sit and talk about costs for doing the outside consultant to do whatever, I have one question. How much is the public's trust worth? Because they've told us they don't trust us. And in order for us to regain their trust, we're going to have to do something that we may not have done before. We may have to do some things that show them that they can trust us. And it might cost some money. But I think that the capital, the collateral that will be gained from that will be far-reaching into the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bryant.
I want to go back to where I started. We have a plan that's really out of date. So when you get input from anyone, you want to have something that's going to support the vision for where you're going. So we can get input on the current plan and then have to go back in a couple of weeks and get some more input, because we have yet to put into what I'll call a strategic look where we're going. So I think that staff has done a good job with where we were. The question is, where are we going? Because we don't want to have big conversations around things that are historic. Where are we going? So I have all the confidence in the world that staff could actually, they're on the right path. I think in due season, we might be able to bring in a consultant. Since I am a consultant, we can bring in a consultant. There is value there to do that. But I think we need to do some homework ourselves first and get this in a place where I would be comfortable, actually, if I were a consultant, going out saying, look, this is our vision for where we're going, this is how you play into it, and this is what we need from you. That's just my 2 cent worth, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Let me get Commissioner Matla.
I support most of it.
Should be.
That's better. Okay. Yeah, I would support doing that as well. But I think when we're looking at bringing in the public input, we also need to be specific in what we're asking them to provide input on. So when we start making individual amendments, you talked about redlining and whatnot. I think a lot of the data we see is all the specific. I want a sidewalk. Bannerman Road needs this, but I'm not sure if we're focusing the questions that we're asking the public on what we're intending to change or what should be changed or what they feel like should be changed. So I think it would be helpful to do both. One, have a workshop for all of us new people who aren't intimately familiar with the comp plan to do a deeper dive, but also to explore having a consultant come in and give us measures of what was successful on things like the Southern Strategy, but also public input if they even knew it was happening and if they feel like they've seen the benefit from that. So I think that would be a good something a consulting firm would be able to do, and paired with a public engagement component.
All right, Commissioner Dozier, and then we do have an additional speaker that I did not get to. And as a classroom teacher for 21 years, I find it difficult to censor public speakers as well, Commissioner Lindley. So thank you for that. If we could get Ms. McGuire to move to the podium while Commissioner Dozier comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to look to the county administrator and then was very surprised. He's got a totally different look right now. Hi,
He's much more handsome, actually.
Yes, we like it. Actually, I would say our county attorney does too, so nice job, guys. I think there was just a coup on the staff end while we've been sitting here. I'm just going to say that. Yes. Okay, so my question is direction, and I'm not sure if this is for the two of you or for Shuri and Ben, but distilling this, it seems like most of us are interested in having more discussion on this, getting some assessment from staff as to if and what a consultant could help on. Could that type of meeting, would it work for the information that you're gathering and looking at, as Commissioner Richardson had pointed out earlier, the status of things? Is that a fall meeting? What's the timing on that? Could you give us some guidance on structuring this based on what you've heard today?
Mr. Pingree, I appreciate you stepping up to the podium because that saved me calling you to the podium.
No, that's great. Well, let's take them in parts. So one is the additional meeting, and then the other one is the staff analysis regarding the consulting. So getting some clear direction at this point in time on both would be great, in whichever order you would want to do that in. But we are happy to go back, look at all the various objectives that we have, see where there could be some assistance from our contract consultants and bring that back to you with cost analyses, et cetera, as the county administrator had said before. If you want that expeditiously, that would elevate through both the city commission and the county commission separately. That would be one subject matter area that, yes, we would love to leave with some clear direction on. The second one would be an additional public meeting, and I'll defer to Cherie in terms of timing, but just getting some clear guidance on that as well would be great.
Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Chair, I had thought, based on this discussion, there was a list of things that Artie had put up there that staff was doing on the analysis end.
Correct.
And looking back at the effectiveness of various policies and things like that, is that something that's ongoing, has not started yet, or is complete?
No, it's ongoing.
It's ongoing. Okay.
Presently. But we've been listening to all the discussion. Make no mistake, you're not starting this conversation that I'm engaging with you from scratch. Given no direction or in terms of specificity, we would go back and look at those subject matter areas where we know there's outside counsel that could be of benefit, that could add value to the process that we've already outlined in detail, keeping time with the goals and objectives and the calendar timelines that you've laid out for us, and we can elevate that back to you. If, on the other hand, you would like to be more specific in certain areas like housing, for example, I think one of the commissioners mentioned, and have us hone in on that, we're happy to do that as well. But right now, to answer, I think, your question, staff is engaging and leading all of it. So we can absolutely identify areas where we could utilize outside counsel and then elevate that back up quickly.
Okay. I'd like to take a stab at this and making a motion. We've tossed a lot on the table today. Perhaps there needs to be time for our staff to digest what we've said and then look at the timing of this. We are both in budget, city and county. So perhaps a motion for a budget agenda item to come back to city and county with staff analysis of what they think a consultant could help with in certain areas, if that is viable, and an update for us on the on this other specifics we've asked about, kind of projecting how long it might take to get an assessment of the Southern strategy and the impact there, or something like that. That way we can look at the specifics and react to it in an agenda item, and they will also have time to look at the calendar and kind of plan this out and give us some suggestions on that. So it would be an agenda item to let staff reflect on the calendar, our conversation today, and the role of a consultant to bring it back to both commissions. We can vet that, give further direction, and set a date if needed. Mr. Temporary County Administrator, with that.
And I heard specifically a budget discussion.
I'm thinking budget discussion for timing purposes based on if we choose to do a consultant, you would need that in the budget.
Correct. That will come to you at the end of April of the year budget workshop. So
okay.
Give them a couple of months to gather information and bring it back.
On what would be most useful and give us a sense of where we've been.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Dozier,
all right, on point, Commissioner Minor, but it's going to be very difficult for me to capture that motion verbatim, so I'll let Commissioner Minor make his comment. You'll go back to the motion, and then we'll look for a second. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, Commissioner Dozier. You're talking about providing multiple options for both the city and the county commissions to choose from based on what staff use could be reasonable options that we'd be interested in.
I'll start with the first comment I made earlier. This has been a great discussion.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this. I mean, this is probably one of the most robust discussions we've had at a comp plan meeting about these different issues, so I'm very glad about that. But I do think our staff can wrap their arms around the timing of the future discussion, where the data collection and assessment is, and whether or not a consultant, based on this discussion, we've just tossed out a lot. So yes, getting some options for them. I don't want to prejudge if they give us one option or 10.
Yeah.
So that's what my clarification there.
Okay.
Just letting staff take this and present us some options so we can take the next step.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Would that be direction for, does this need a city and a county motion to get a budget item on both sides? Okay. So that would be my motion for the county.
Two separate motions.
It'd be your motion, be our motion to vote on first.
We'll follow after you for the
okay.
record.
Motions have been made by Commissioner Dozier. She did a very good job of capturing exactly what she wanted to say, and I won't try to repeat it. Seconded, and Ms. Voss, I'm sure you did. Seconded by Commissioner Minor. All those in favor signify.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Or, if you don't mind, could we hear the comment prior to taking the vote?
Sure. We have a public comment. We have Ms. Gray. Am I correct? I'm sorry. Ms. McGuire. Ms. Gray has already spoken. My apologies. Name and address for the record.
Thank you. I'm Kathy McGuire, 1101 Pine Street. And I'm sorry to get in the way of your momentum at this point. But I just wanted to speak for a moment to the question about citizen participation in the comp planning process. As somebody who has been interested in planning and has been participating, which is that obviously the staff has, done a lot of public outreach and given the public a lot of opportunity to come in and speak. But it's been, up to this point, it's from my perspective been a little frustrating because I felt like the input's been pretty directed and kind of shallow, at a shallow level. And so that's why I'm excited to see this new schedule with the deep dives in it. Because like when I came in at Jack McLean and sat down in my circle of people were full of ideas, and they were all kinds of ideas, but the way that night was orchestrated, in an effort to deal with all of us and all of the issues, we were given a topic through the die to get one topic to speak to for our circle. And so I'm hoping that these deep dives will give people an opportunity to really talk about the objectives and share their ideas in a more free-flowing way. I also found the survey a little frustrating because as somebody who's used to do surveys for work, I'm not sure how it's quantified, how it's used, what we can get from it, and now a new survey is out. And so if you're trying to think about how can consultants help, I would say it would be to provide staff extra assistance to get numbers to the public so that, as it was referenced earlier, they can, speak in an informed way. I've gone to meetings recently about Midtown where there's very specific numbers. Okay, these many people are coming, they're coming to Midtown, or they're coming to the core of the city. How are we going to have businesses for them? How are we going to find places for them to live? And so I don't really understand those numbers, and I think coming in to talk about it with a comp plan, knowing those numbers and knowing that just like the planning department, we as citizens have to understand and respond to that growth would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire. I apologize again. Ms. Lightsey. Okay, it didn't make its way to me. Name and address for the record.
Debbie Lightsey, 2340 Cypress Cove Drive. Been there like 35 years. On the rewrite of the land use element, just to the big picture issues. I heard Commissioner Lindley say that the comp plan has the force of law. It does, because it is the law. It is passed as an ordinance, and it is the law. Within the comp plan, we have all these elements, and they have to be consistent with each other. So when you do a rewrite of one section, particularly starting with land use, you can't come around later and say, well, we wanted to do this, but it's not consistent with all the other elements. You need an integrated approach. If you were using an accepted evaluation process, like the EAR report, which was done every 7 years, it looks at the whole plan because all these things are integrated. You've pulled out the land use element when, in fact, if there is a super element in the plan, it is by law stated that that's the conservation element, and everything has to be consistent with it. So you're taking land use and combining it with mobility, and you're taking that when everything's got to be consistent with the conservation element, and then you're talking about affordable housing, well, you've got a housing element. So the whole idea for a consultant is that the consultant goes out and looks at your plan, sees what you've done well, what you haven't accomplished, what's outdated, takes a comprehensive view of your comprehensive plan so that your revisions as they come forward are internally consistent. And all this should be data-driven. In the evaluation and appraisal report, the EAR report, it was all data-driven. What you did well, what needs to be accomplished now that may be new. So I suggest that you have to look at the whole plan. You can't just pull one piece out, and you can't pull out and leave the one that's the primary governing element, which is the conservation plan, still standing. On the sector plans, some of them are referenced in the plan, so they have the force of law too. Some citizens worked on for years and they never got in the plan itself, like the Lake Bradford sector plan. So staff kind of implied that some of these were just going to disappear because you had achieved what you wanted to do or they were outdated. Well, in whose opinion have you achieved this? There were hundreds of citizens that took part in those plans, and you might want to go back and touch base with them. And certainly these things just can't disappear because staff says you finished them. One last point. The city is getting ready to do a strategic plan initiative. And that made me go and read the county's plan. And it's a very worthwhile document. And it's got guidelines about what you're going to accomplish and dates and whatever. I would suggest that if you're going to, the strategic plan should probably be finished and inform the comp plan changes or vice versa. I don't think you can do them simultaneously and treat them both as seriously as they ought to be treated. So the consultant is for a comprehensive review because the elements have to fit together. But please don't forget the sector plans. And if you do a strategic plan and it comes out with different things than you've just written into the comp plan, well, where are you then? So something has to come, life comes in sequences and it's not always orderly. So sometimes you have to stand back and take a look and say, well, which one of these should be done first? And how well do we hope to do it? And same data and analysis that you're going to need for the strategic plan is what I think you need for the comp plan rewrite. So I'm just trying to pull some of these things together. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lightsey. Thank you. We have a county vote regarding bringing this back as a April budget discussion item. That was a motion made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Minor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. Passes 5-0 with Commissioner Proctor and Commissioner Deloge out of chambers.
Colleagues, when it deals with specific policy and finances, we do a county vote and a city vote. Is there someone that would like to make a similar motion to what the county's just sponsored?
So moved.
Probably moved by Commissioner Bryan. Is there a second to the motion?
Can we restate that one more time? I apologize.
Can I get a second first and then we'll get clarification?
Second.
Okay, probably second by Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I know there's a lot of moving pieces here. We've talked about a lot. That's what this motion is, just to get an agenda item from staff during the budget process for both city and county that is a common agenda item. We'll share the information, I assume, if it's coming back for planning, to look at if and where a consultant might be useful to us, to give us an idea of the status of the sector reports and other things like that, where the assessment is, where they are in the data collection that could inform our choices, and to project possible timeline for a meeting to look at that information, just giving them some time to digest basically what they've heard today and bring us an agenda item with options. And I suppose at that time, Mr. Mayor, if city and county commissions respectively make changes to that, since it might be a joint consultant, say, typically that item would be bounced back and forth if either of us make changes. Would that be your sense, Mr. Mayor? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that help, Commissioner Morella?
So, Commissioner, the way how it plays out is we'll have a day during the budget process where staff will bring back specific items for us to get into detailed discussions with. County does the same thing. Counties will have theirs on a Tuesday. We'll have ours on a Wednesday. This will be an item. It'll be similar, brought back to both. And as the Commissioner mentioned, if there's changes, our staff will bring back the amended as it was discussed at the city to see if we wanted to move forward as well. But it just allows us to shine a light on this particular item during our budget process and to have a greater discussion.
Does that help?
Yeah,
So, Mr. Mayor, so
Yes, sir.
the staff will come back with these options for consultants. They will have a price tag associated with, because we got to know the fiscal impact if we're going to approve this. So staff will come back with these recommendations and the fiscal impact, and then we determine where it's going to come from, because it's got to come from somewhere in that budget. We've got to decide where it comes from and what it's going to be taken from. Okay.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely correct. I would imagine on our side, even though we have a couple more revenue resources than the county, I would suggest it would probably come out of general.
Well, if you've got the more revenue, then you can cover our side. We'll just still.
Mr. Chairman, I'd love to, but by law, we just can't do it that way. So we'll have to. I know. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. If it's a $200,000 study and we split it down the middle, they're going to have to figure out where their 100,000 is coming from. We're going to have to figure out where our 100,000 is coming from, or whatever the tag. So the motion today is just to bring it back for discussion during the budget cycle. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, passes unanimously 5-0. Mr. Chairman, it's yours.
Okay, any other items for discussion? I think Artie is done with his show, and again, I would like to thank my colleagues from across the street for coming over and visiting, and for Commissioner/Mayor Daley stopping by and visiting his old digs, which are redecorated. A motion to adjourn. So move. Adjourn. It's 2:58, Ms. Voss.